Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews video, and today we're looking at another RPG, again by Cubicle 7. This one is set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe and it is called Wrath and Glory. Now this is one hefty tome. As you can see, it is a big book, and this is your starting book for creating RPGs in this game system. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm not going to go through absolutely everything because, like I say, it's massive. But we're going to take a look inside each of the main segments of the book and give you kind of an idea of how the RPG works, where it's set, and the different characters you can roll and play as in game. So let's start at the front. Gorgeous cover, showing off some of the characters that you can role play as in the game. It gives you a bit of a flavour, a bit of a taste. We open up into some lore and some more artwork. You've got a full table of contents, so you can quickly find what you're after, which is handy, obviously, in an RPG when there's so many different elements. The first few pages really are to introduce you to Wrath and Glory, where the game is being set, how you use this book, how you create your RPG and how you play through it. What's really cool about Wrath and Glory is it's set in the current timeline. So basically you're stranded on the wrong side of the rift. So we're in the Dark Imperium. I can't remember the name of what the rift's called now, but we're on the wrong side of it. So we're cut off from the Imperium. So it really gives you a good background element to what's going to be happening in your RPG. Lots of tasty lore to get stuck into. And we very quickly get to the character creation. So character creation is a really interesting one because you've got quite a few varying sort of power levels of characters that you can play as in Wrath and Glory. So if Cubicle 7 weren't careful, you could have parties where you've got a really overpowered Space Marine and then you've got other players that played as Imperial Guardsmen. So what Cubicle 7 have done is they've created all these different archetypes, but then they put them into tiers and different frameworks. So you choose what tier you want your RPG to be set in, and that kind of then sets the characters that your players can create from. So you're not going to have a mismatch of players, some that like a guardsman and others that are like a Primaris intercessor. Completely two different ends of the scale when it comes to the skills and abilities and powers that they're going to have, which is really cool. So this page shows off exactly what I'm talking about. So in tier 1, so this is your lower experience kind of RPG, where you start off with less experience. So in tier 1, for example, the lowest experience sort of starting point of the RPG, you've got stuff like an Imperial Guardsman, you've got an Inquisitorial Acolyte, you've got a Ganger, you've got a Corsair. Going up to tier 4, where you can play as an Inquisitor or a Primaris Intercessor. Like I say, total other end of the scale when it comes to abilities, strength and so on. You've got quite a few different selections here. You've got the likes of Tech Priests, you've got Skitarii, you've got Rogue Traders. So you can really go to town. If you've ever sort of played the tabletop game and thought, it'd be really cool to play a role-playing game where I could be a rogue trader out in the galaxy, you most certainly can do that with this book. The book then goes on to talk about attributes and skills, talents and psychic powers, how you select all those. And then it kind of breaks down into each of the actual individual factions. So it starts off with the Imperium of Man, giving you sort of backgrounds into what... Oh, of course, you can also play as Orc and Eldar as well, which is really cool. Wasn't expecting that. I was expecting it to be an RPG where you would just be playing as Imperium of Man. You wouldn't have a choice to play as any Xenos races. The Gilead system is where this is set. So I mentioned earlier on in the video that we're on sort of the wrong side of the Dark Imperium. We're in this place called the Gilead system. This book is very keen to stress that all the sort of rules and stuff in this and the planets that this book focuses on, it's only really a framework. You can really go to and create your own planets. It's your RPG. This book is just guidance to help you along the way, especially if it's your first RPG. It breaks down character creation even more. You can roll to see what colour your hair is, colour your eyes are, any augmentations. Bringing your character to life really helps you create kind of a backstory. You know, creating a character is like one of the coolest things about RPGs. It's one of my favourite parts of an RPG. You know, creating this character. I've even in the past sort of painted a model to represent myself. It also gives me an idea of what I want to look like, you know, what I want to play as in the RPGs that we've gone on and played. It breaks down all your different combat traits, so it fully details, for example, what wounds are, social traits. Advanced character creation breaks down attributes, skills, and talents even more so. War gear. Tells you how to fill in your character sheet summary, which we'll see later on in the book. Really handy. And I think they're also available from Cubicle 7's website as well, so you can download and print your own. It then details each of the factions that you can play in the game. This is all really cool if you actually not too fussed about getting really stuck into an RPG, but you want to learn more about Warhammer 40,000. There's actually a lot of really good lore telling you about all the different sort of major key players, especially in the Imperium. So we'll flick through here. One of my favourite factions is represented here with the Adeptus Mechanicus, tinkering with technology as they do. Within the faction segment, it also breaks down for your particular faction their backgrounds that you can choose from, so you can have a roll or choose yourself, and it also gives you objectives as well that you can roll for, which will play a part in your RPG. So you know which faction you want to play. You've kind of had a look at all the character creation. Let's break down into each of the archetypes a little bit deeper. The RPG is really easy to start up and play, and it's all thanks to this little box here where it gives you suggested attributes, your suggested skills. It really breaks down your abilities and stuff to make it as easy as possible to get stuck into the game. It also features the tier that they're in, so depending on the framework and tier that you've chosen to play this particular RPG in, you can choose the corresponding correct archetype, so you fit that kind of power level, which is really, really cool. You've of course got background as well, so if you're not massively into Warhammer 40k but you find yourself getting involved in this RPG, you're not sure what a Skitarii Ranger is, here you go. You've got lore to tell you all about the character that you could potentially be playing. With any RPG, attributes and skills are vital because this is how you're going to perform in the RPG. Depending on your skills and attributes, you could be really good in combat, you could be really good at initiative and willpower tests. This is all kind of worked out in your character creation, and your skills will sort of increase and your abilities will get better as you progress through the RPG and you gain experience. So this section really goes into detail on what each of the key sorts of attributes are. It breaks down all your skills that you can learn. Some characters start with a particular skill set. So yeah, it really breaks all those down. Following on from that, you've got talents. So you've got a list of talents that you can sort of purchase with experience during the course of the game. Some of these might be locked depending on the character that you're playing as, or some of them just might not be beneficial for the character you're playing. You know, an orc doesn't need to worry about acute senses, perhaps. So there's quite a few of these, but the book gives you lots and lots of different options, all with different effects. So it's really cool. We've mentioned about the tier system, and actually as you progress through the RPG, you can ascension, you can level up, you can move up a tier depending on how your games master wants to run the RPG. This will unlock even more different abilities, experience. It allows you to kind of further tune or maybe even upgrade your character that you're playing as. This book details how that works, although obviously it's up to the games master, you know, if they want to kind of adjust that. Perhaps allow you to choose a different archetype. It's all really explained in this section. and you've got various examples of how you might play that out in the game. We now move on to the core rules of the game, so how you're going to play this RPG. It talks about the golden rule. All RPGs, they're fun. You know, nobody wants to take these things too seriously. They're open to a lot of adjustment as the game goes on. They haven't really got most games masters don't have a completely rigid and strict turn of events. They tend to be quite fluid, quite free flowing. And this rule set really allows games masters to sort of change things on the fly, to alter things, to make it fun for everybody involved, whilst also telling a story. So the core mechanics is obviously knowing what to roll to do, combat, different tests. Perhaps you're looking for something. So this detail, these 2 pages here detail how exactly that works. First of all, your games master is going to set a difficulty for whatever you're doing, and you then need to assemble your dice pool. So you look at your different attributes, that tells you how many dice that you have, and then you roll your dice and see if you beat the difficulty that your games master has set out. The results can be narrated and changed depending on what your games master wants to do. When it comes to setting the difficulty, these next 2 pages give an example of how you would do that. So, for example, here you've got modifiers for different difficulties and examples of what you might be trying to do. For example, opening a sealed rations tin, that's pretty easy. But wrestling a dreadnought, well, that's a bit more challenging. So this really helps the games master to set out the difficulty for what his players are trying to do. You also have something called a raft die, which is a bit more of a sort of a narrative effect that can kick in during combat or during whatever you're doing within the game. You've got criticals and complications that can come from that. And you accrue raft points and glory points, which you can spend. Raft points, for example, you can spend to change the outcome of tests, which is really cool. So if you've not rolled very well, then you could spend a raft point to turn the tide. From a narrative point of view, perhaps you found some inner fire that's kind of kicked in and you've managed to overthrow the odds and have managed to succeed. Glory, again, like I say, you can gain and then spend to increase your damage, increase your dice pool, which makes tests easier because you've got more dice to roll. So that's really cool. So we sort of know how combat works, but these next few pages really go into depth on how the sort of combat phase takes place. We all know you're kind of rolling against difficulty, but there are other sort of things to consider as you're entering combat. So we've got something called initiative order. So what you'll actually find is when you start a combat, you're not all going to be able to take a turn before the enemy does. You'll choose between you who takes the first initiative during the combat. Once you've made your combat attack, the games master then chooses one of your threats, one of your enemies, to take a turn. So it's going to be you've got to be quite careful that you're doing things in the right order, because if you've got one of the players is kind of low on health or something, or is in trouble, you might want to go with them first to try and get them out of dodge, sort of thing, before the threat maybe finishes them off or captures them or whatever. To counter that, you can actually seize the initiative. So once a player has taken a turn, another player might actually be able to jump in before the threat, changing the initiative step, which is really, really cool. This is Warhammer 40,000. It's not just all about close combat. It also goes into detail on how range attacks work, ammo and reloading. You can shoot into combat. Obviously, there's downsides to that as well. So it's really cool. You've even got scatter dice as well for scatter shots. So yeah, it really does go into a lot of detail on combat and how that works within the game. When you've completed a section of your RPG, perhaps a combat's just finished, you've then got to look at if you've got any injuries, memorable injuries, traumatic injuries that could see your character leave the RPG. You've got stuff between sort of the missions that you're playing, resting, conditions that you might carry over into the next part of your RPG adventure, and perhaps even an attribute that's been given to you. Warhammer isn't Warhammer without war gear. This part of the book details how you get war gear, how you repair war gear, and then goes into detail on what these war gears can do. You know, different weapon traits. You got melee weapons. You've got range weapons, and this shows you how much damage they do, the different traits that they have, and the keywords. Because not every character can't take every weapon. So this part tells you who can take what. You know, you're not going to have an Imperial Guardsman running around with, I don't know, a Psychic Stave or something, or a Thunderhammer. Obviously, we've mentioned alien races. You've got some Eldari weapons and some Orc weapons in here as well, which is really, really cool. And you've got all your range weapons there. Orc and Eldari range weapons. After weapons, we've got armor. Again, these are locked to different archetypes, so not every archetype can wear every piece of armor. But this part of the book tells you what traits they have, what armor value they've got, and how rare they are to achieve, to obtain within the RPG. It's not all about combat and armor. You also are going to need different pieces of equipment. You know, you never go anywhere without a medikit, for example. Who would step out into an RPG without a medikit? You've got some more unusual ones as well. Pre-sense goggles. You've got ration packs, respirators, all with their value and how much they are to get, how rare they are, and the keywords on who can take them. Same goes with Eldar and Orcs as well. If you have rolled an archetype or have picked an archetype that has access to psychic powers, then you're going to need to know how to use said psychic powers and how to gain them as the game progresses. This talks about, what psychic powers are, how they affect your mind, your different disciplines, how you gain them, and then their experience costs, which is really cool. Quite fancy being a psyker in an RPG. Maybe a psyker, a psychic inquisitor if I can within this RPG. But be warned, you can peril in the warp. So if you played Warhammer 40k, you might know rolling a double 1 or a double 6 from taking a test. You perils, potentially doing damage to yourself. You've got a massive list here that you have to roll on if you do peril during Wrath and Glory. And unfortunately, that some of these are not nice outcomes. But thus, their psychic powers, they're powerful, but they always have to have downsides. The book breaks down all your different disciplines, what all the psychic powers do. Some of them are buffs, some of them are more aggressive attacking abilities, and you also have some that are locked to Orcs and Eldar as well, but the majority are for the Imperium of Man. There's quite a good proportion in the book here that talks about the Gilead system. So there's a few planets that they pick out, talking about what they're like, who inhabit them, giving you an idea of what you can do within these planets. Maybe your games master will set out an adventure on one of them, tying into the lore that's in this book. But you could absolutely just create your own planet. You could create your own system if you wanted. It's the joy of RPGs. Some games masters are incredibly talented when it comes to stuff, original content for their RPGs, and that's absolutely fine. Speaking of games masters, there's a part of this book which is specifically for them. So this helps you set out your RPG and gather your party, clearing up any rules, helping you create characters with your players, your friends. And it kind of picks up on, different indiscretions that might happen during the RPG. How do you resolve those? And things like that, which is really cool. We're moving towards the end of the book now, and we've got the bestiary. This is going to be all the different creatures that you're going to come across within the RPG. You know, whether or not some of these might be enemies, or they might just be different people that you encounter during the game. So if we flick through these, we'll get to some tasty, here we go, some possessed. Chaos Space Marines, there's a death card there. Possessed Chaos Space Marines. Yeah, lots of variety when it comes to different threats that you can encounter during the game. So your Games Master can really go to town on who's going to turn up and get in your way whilst you're on your adventure. Earlier we came across a couple of pages that detailed how you fill in your character creation sheet. Here's a copy that you can photocopy for use in your games. Obviously I wouldn't write on the one in the book, but you may want to get this photocopied. As I mentioned earlier, I'm pretty sure there is a downloadable version of this on the Cubicle 7 website, which is even easier. You can print that with absolute ease, but you have got a copy in here should you wish to photocopy it. And then to finish off the book, it kind of clear up keywords that you might have come across during the book, and at a very quick glance an index. So if there's a specific rule, specific piece of equipment or something that you need to know what it does quickly, then shoot to the index, and it'll tell you the page number that you need to flick to. And you've actually got an advert for Soulbound in the back as well, which we did a video on only a couple of weeks ago. I might put a link for that in the description so you can check that out. That's the Age of Sigmar RPG, again by Cubicle 7, which is also very, very good. So that brings us to the end of the book. That was a very quick run through of the content in here. There was quite a few things that I didn't talk about. You can get corrupted. There's different rules for that in the book. There isn't any pre-made adventures in here, but there are expansions already available to download and to purchase, should you wish to follow kind of a rough guideline of a preset adventure. But there is plenty in this rulebook for a Games Master to just start their own adventure from scratch, gather some friends round and create characters and get stuck in. My favourite part of this RPG, I mean, I've not played a massive amount of them, but what I have liked about reading through this one is the tier system. So it keeps everybody on kind of a level playing field, and it stops a player from overpowering everybody else in the party. That's just not going to be fun, is it? So that's really cool. But you're not locked into that tier, as we mentioned. There are ways to advance through the tiers, level up, gain experience, gain new abilities, and potentially slightly tweak your archetype that you've chosen. So all in all, a very good book, very high quality, some gorgeous artwork in here, lots and lots of lore, a really good read. And actually over on spruesandbrews.com, Matt did write up quite a good review quite a few months ago when the book first launched, before we had this physical copy which Cubicle 7 very kindly sent to us to look at. I'll put a link to that in the YouTube description so you can check that out and read that at your leisure. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It was quite a lengthy one as we flick through this book. It does look like a really good RPG, and hopefully when everything's a bit more back to normal, we'll actually be able to play some RPGs around a table again. One can hope. So until next time, have a fantastic time hobbying away, and we'll be back again with another video very, very soon. Bye!